So anyone here able to read Sumerian? No? Ah, great. Then I can say this says anything I want. Say again? Is that a tax record? Good guess, but I don't think so. Well, I'm going to claim it's not. So the Sumerians, you'll know about the Sumerians, and how long ago were they established? Yeah, always test the audience. About 7,500 years ago was the beginnings of the Sumerian civilization, and they lasted to about 2,500 years ago. And they're not the oldest civilization, but they're the oldest one that has left a written record. Fairly interesting society. It's not backward. They established city-states. They had sort of hierarchies in the way the society was organized. They had different roles. They had farming. They had bureaucrats. They had technologists who did irrigation was a kind of primary technology. And they left these records. Now, a lot of them are tax records. They're explanations of, here are the list of all the kings. They're sort of census information. But a small proportion of them are also letters from administrators up to the leaders of the civilization talking about matters of the day. So this one, I now claim, is a letter from a sort of middle-ranking official who's busy saying, civilization is doomed, the youth of today are lazy, they don't pay attention to what they're doing, they don't respect their elders, they don't respect tradition, we're going to hell in a handcart. So basically your average letter to a tabloid newspaper. So some things never change. Now, of course, the guy was right, they died out. It took 2,000 years, but they did die out. And they left, well, what did they leave behind? They left about 1 million of these tablets, and we haven't translated them all. It takes a fair old while. It's not exactly easy to read. They left us the idea of the 60-second minute, which I now see ticking down very rapidly here. They left us the 60-minute hour. They left us the idea of 2 12-hour portions to the day. They left us the idea of a working day and a non-working period in the day. They left us the idea of beer. They left us the idea of days off. I wonder why those two things go together. So they left us a lot. I like to think that Homer Simpson would have made his home in Sumeria and been quite happy. So we can look back 7,500 years, about as far as we can go back, and we can see a society that's different in many levels, but not so different. They're still people like we're people. We might not speak the language, but with a bit of adjustment, we might fit in. So let's think about another progress timescale. I recently reached my 50th birthday. No, don't say, oh, surely not Colin. That's for other talks. Pick your parents carefully is all I would say. But it got me thinking about my granny, who lived to be just on 100. She was 99 and a half when she died. She just failed to make the century. And she lived for most of the 20th century, so a slight overlap at either end of 20th and 21st centuries. And in her lifetime, we went from getting into the air by using a counterweight and slingshotting this series of twigs and bits of canvas and this very, very early petrol engine, and managed to fly about the wingspan of a current airliner. And within 100 years, we're flying into space. Spaceship One. Richard Branson will happily take your deposit right now for a flight sometime in the next couple of years into space on the commercial development of that jet. So we've had amazing technical progress. We've had social progress. Beginning of my granny's life, you had to own property in the UK to be allowed to vote. So we like to think democracy is something we've had here for a long time. We may have other debates about that for another 10-minute session, perhaps. But that has moved over. We went to the suffragettes, universal suffrage, to having women premiers around the world, so more people participating. We've had health progress. You realize that you are the last mortal generation, I hope? Your kids are going to live forever? Well, maybe not, but those are some of the trends we have in progress. So we've had amazing technical change. However, we've also had some other changes. We've invented nuclear weapons and used them. We've invented total war, where we fight not just with other armies, but with the populations, the infrastructure. Anyone can be a combatant. We've invented obsolescence, planned obsolescence in products, which Elena talked a little about before. We're filling up the ground with rubbish. Anyone who's come up with a solution about nuking the landfills, don't want to hear about that. Not a helpful thing. So we've had some technical progress. We've had some things that are not so good. So what about in my lifetime? Well, when I was born, teenagers had just been invented. You may laugh, but it wasn't a thing. You got to end of school age, you became a man in a suit with a tie. I've forgotten my tie. You know, you were like your parents. Teenagers were a new thing. When I was a child just going to school, we were all going to holiday on the moon, cars would fly, electricity would be too cheap to meter. We'll explain it here, a little explanation why that's not the case. So lots of expectations of progress that then didn't happen. So really, I guess what I'm saying is our understanding, our expectations, our knowledge of progress is highly suspect. It depends very much on the timescales that we look at. So what does that mean about where we're going? Well, most of my formal education was around you have a cause and an effect, and they go in cycles. So if you do this, then that, then that, then that. Arguments about free will, the mechanistic universe, and so forth. And I guess one of the things I've learned over time is that that's not how it happens. It's not that simple. And people tend to say, well, we just need to have a better understanding of what that cause has and what that effect happens. So I think one of the opportunities that I've seen through my lifetime is a beginning to move away from that very simplistic understanding of the world and what goes on. So I just want you to quickly take that in. This is systems thinking, or this is an aspect of systems thinking. And systems thinking is different in that it sits back and says, you have to understand things that are in a system as a whole. Their behavior is emergent. So we can't look at individual bits of the whole and say, this is how they'll behave. So I'm a system. I'm a system of cells, of biology, of physics to a level, chemistry, biochemistry. And any understanding of any one of those bits will not tell you who I am. You have to take me as a whole. Systems have interaction. So this is the World 3 model, or a part of the World 3 model, which was developed to explain, to understand what the future for the world might be. And it was quite good. It was a really excellent piece of work. In 1973, it was pretty certain the world would come to an end in about 1999. But it's really a good piece of work. But what it let us do is actually begin to look at, well, if we have these assumptions, what does that mean? If we have industrial progress, which increases wealth, but it's also increasing pollution, that has an impact on farming land. If we change farming practices that have an impact on the fertility of land, all these things interact. And we can't understand the behavior until we can look at it as a whole. So the ability to model that was a really, really important thing. So systems thinking, without taking the 10-minute discussion in the next 1 minute, is really about a way of beginning to understand things as a whole. And the key aspects of it we talk about are connectedness. So if I have a heap of rubble and I split it in two, I've got two mini heaps of rubble. The fact that they're lumped together, they're not connected, it's not relevant. If you take me and you cut me in half, you don't have two mini me's. I know there are probably experimentalists in the audience. Please just take this for granted. You don't have to try it. So connectedness is a really important thing. Feedback is a really important part of systems. So that's part of what you're seeing here, is all the different loops that connect things together. So feedback is a core element. And the last idea behind systems thinking is that if you want a system to be stable, if you want it to be able to adapt and survive or thrive, you need enough variety in the system to cope with the different variety that goes on in the world. So if we take this idea of connectedness, of the need for variety, of feedback, then I think we can begin to see some ideas about where we're going. So this is a map of the internet. It's presumably out of date because I've actually got a copy of it, therefore it will have changed. But if we think of a system of humanity, a system that's about developing, about moving forward, about becoming more, then what I'd look for in that system is fast feedback, honest, clear feedback, connectedness. So is there a technology out there that allows us to do some of these things? allows us to put ideas out there. If only we videoed ideas and put them on something that could maybe connect to people. If only we could get instant feedback from people about, that's a crap idea, Colin, go away, etc., and develop these ideas. You know, it sounds a lot like Web 2.0, doesn't it? So if you ask me, where are we going? I've told you, I have no idea. If you ask me, am I positive about where we're going? Man, that's a different thing. When I was an undergraduate, just about to graduate, we had AIDS. I didn't have to worry about AIDS because Thatcher, Brezhnev, and Reagan were going to nuke us all before it was a problem. I was very, very pessimistic about the future. Today, I see the kind of connectedness that there is, the opportunities for thinking differently, the technologies that could do so much, and a beginning to think different, using things like systems thinking in all the variety of ways it's described. And I think we might just make it. We might just see what we need to do, act differently ourselves, but in common with other groups, subgroups across the world, and actually build a fairly positive future. So on that note, I think I shall leave you. Thank you.